We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 6. Yeah, it's a new season. It's a new swag. It's a whole new everything, man. First and foremost, man, we on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide hot fire takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And if it's your first time listening, we appreciate the check-in, man. The Spot, hitting y'all doing what we call primetime sports across the whole landscape, man. 2 times a week. Man, the debut show coming out in a couple of weeks, but we had to hit y'all with a little summer sauce, man. A little summer sauce out here, man. It's just percolating across the summer. It's a lot of big-time moves going on out here, man. First and foremost, didn't formally say, but congratulations to the New York Knicks winning the NBA championship. You know, I know that was, last month or so, man, but definitely got to give the Knicks some love, man. Jalen Brunson, NBA Finals MVP. It's just been some crazy times across the National Basketball Association last season. Knicks number 3 seed went on to win that chip. Jalen Brunson, one-man gang out here, man, putting Harden on skates and skating to the NBA Finals and taking out the San Antonio Spurs. And the summer's been exciting. There's been a lot of moves across NBA free agency and so forth. We had Giannis leaving the Milwaukee Bucks, going down to the Miami Heat. I just got an opportunity to check him out, just the whole behind-the-scenes look of him making that transition down, man, from cold Milwaukee down to Miami. Shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks fans, man. I know some of them are very upset that he left, but, I'm getting some good vibes up in Milwaukee that a lot of people, wished him well. He did bring a championship to Milwaukee, first time since my man Lou Alcindor, known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robertson, and that crew, won a championship back in the early 70s. But, it never fails. It never fails, man. LeBron James. LeBron left the Los Angeles Lakers, transitioned on to the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers, they cooking hot this summer, man. Acquired Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics. That was a big-time move. Shipped out Paul George. And the king, LeBron James, has landed on the doorstep of the Philadelphia 76ers. Shout out to Mike Gansey, too, man, general manager of the Philadelphia 76ers. I remember when Mike Gansey was a college basketball player at West Virginia, man, back in the early 2000s, man. Good basketball player. And, he's moved on to the front office in the NBA annals. And, he's done a great job so far. I think a lot of people, looked at Philadelphia losing to, last season, man, just getting DDT by the Knicks. And the Knicks was just on one last season, obviously winning the NBA championship. But, my whole thing about LeBron James, man, is here we go again. Here we go again, man. I mean, it's a situation to where, and first and foremost, man, to the LeBron lovers out there, I'm not hating. But to me, at the end of the day, LeBron, age 40 plus, keeping himself in good shape. I can't be mad at him about that. But as far as him being a power player in the NBA, I think those days are over with, man. And I just think that ESPN been landing on real heavy, real heavy. And, I just think that LeBron James, at this point in his career, being over the age of 40, he's the number 3 guy. You saw it in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Lakers. A lot of people say, hey, well, he broke up with them. Nah, I think they broke up with him, player. I think the Los Angeles Lakers and Rob Pelinka and the new ownership, Walter, I thought they just simply moved on from LeBron James, meaning that they got a superstar in tow in Luka Doncic. I think they was just tired of the whole clutch situation out there in Los Angeles. And I thought that once Jeannie Buss sold the team, I thought that the Los Angeles Lakers was already moving in the direction of getting rid of LeBron James. And, a lot of people, put the sauce on it, say, hey, well, he just want to win. I mean, that's every season, man. Like, who we fooling? He wanted to win last year. He wanted to win the year before that. So this ain't a new frontier. It's a situation for me to where the Los Angeles Lakers, simply chose to, pay market value for Austin Reeves more so than LeBron James. And, they've laid out the red carpet for LeBron. You look at his tenure out in Los Angeles. He won a world, championship with the Lakers, man, back in, 2020 bubble year. And, as much as people, want to, big it up or want to down it, at the end of the day, it was just unfamiliar circumstances across not only the NBA, but the whole world as a whole, just with the whole pandemic going on. And I don't discredit him for winning that chip, but at the end of the day, if you'd have told me when LeBron James went out to the Los Angeles Lakers, he would only win one championship in 7, 8 seasons out there, I would just be like, all right. I don't think it's a situation to where, like I said, he moves the needle anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've been around enough to see a lot of great players, whether it be, when I first started watching basketball, a guy like Dr. J. He exited stage left gracefully. He saw what the league was about. Still you had, this is 1987 we talking about, but, you still had Bird and Magic still going on in their wars. You had a Dominique Wilkins down in Atlanta making noise, Isaiah Thomas creeping on the come up. You had, of course, his heiress Michael Jeffrey Jordan up in Chicago putting in business. So it was a different league. Dr. J saw that and he exited stage left. It was over. And so I just think that for a lot of players, that's a hard, situation to grasp. LeBron, not the first guy that, on the way out, he was scratching on the walls, like a cat. You trying to throw him off the third floor, he ain't want to go. So, I can't knock that from just being a competitor. But, if you telling me that LeBron James is a 1-2 option to help a team win an NBA championship, them days are over. And ain't nothing wrong with that. I already hear the rumblings. Hey, if they win, if he wins in Philadelphia next season, it'll be their first championship since 1983. But we all know that LeBron James is not going to be the main guy stirring the wheel. We all know that. Come on now. You look at, Tyrese Maxey, who is an all-star player. He's an all-NBA caliber player, phenomenal talent. He's driving that bus. Jaylen Brown, the most recent NBA Finals MVP, LeBron James, other than on that team. He got a bone to pick. His situation in Boston just kind of blew up out of nowhere, even though there's a lot of speculations about, what he was saying and, on Twitch and, doing all of that. But at the end of the day, we went into, a year or so ago, or freshly after they won the NBA championship, you thought those two guys were going to be together for a minute, him and Jason Tatum. So, at the end of the day, I just think that, if Philadelphia does win, it won't be solely because of LeBron James, and anybody thinking differently is a little bit confused out here. And so it's a lot of interesting things going on across the National Basketball Association. Like I said, man, you had, a few moves, some trades out here, man. And we'll get in depth on that, definitely in season 6 premiere show coming up in a couple of weeks. But, I had to hit y'all with a little sauce, man. It's been a hot minute, man. I know, a lot of y'all, man, just been rocking with us over the last, 5 seasons or so. And we appreciate you guys and appreciate bringing some new listeners on board, man. But we kicking the sauce across the whole sport landscape, NBA, college basketball, college football. Can't forget about the National Football League. Its training camp is coming up. A lot of teams, or all the teams at this point, have reported a training camp. And so it's on and cracking for the football lovers out there. And I'm definitely one of them, man. So we're going to kick game across the whole National Football League. Going to give that official, preview look across the league. Also, too, going to throw out there who I believe is going to, raise the Lombardi Trophy this season. And so it's going down. But speaking of the NFL, there's some quarterbacks out there that they still got that albatross on. One of them is Josh Allen. At some point, they move into the new digs, the Buffalo Bills next season. I mean, can he get them to the Super Bowl? It's been 30 years since the Bills have made it to the Super Bowl. We all know what happened in the 90s. Some of my OGs out there, them losing 4 consecutive Super Bowl games, between 1993. And so, for them, it's been a long time coming. And so Josh Allen, it's time for him to try to get this team over the hump. He brought in DJ Moore this season. It was a good acquisition, I believe. Increased, just their receiving core. Got my man, Dobbs over there, and so I'm liking what I'm seeing. But I think at the end of the day, at some point you got to break through. Another gentleman in the AFC under the same circumstances is Lamar Jackson. He's got to make a situation in Baltimore where they got a new head coach and mentor his first season. Showed John Harbaugh the door. And so, yeah, the pressure's on them guys. Can't forget about my man Joe Burrow. This is a team that, for most people would think that, Zach Taylor wouldn't be the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals after them not making the playoffs the last couple of seasons. But in all fairness, their team that's a one-sided football club on the offensive side and no D. Then you had, Joe Burrow, being nicked up over the last 2 years a little bit. And so, yeah, for those three customers, and it's funny because all three of them was in the AFC, is that, it's put up or shut up time. And so, we're going to kick some game across the National Football League. Can't forget about Aaron Rodgers. This is his last NFL season for the Pittsburgh Steelers as we keep it in the AFC. We'll just see, what Pittsburgh does, man. I mean, I just think that, they're moving on from a long tenure coach and Mike Tomlin, so we'll see what that do, man. So the AFC, the NFC stacked as well. My Chicago Bears, can't be remiss not talk about my Bears. Caleb Williams freshly minted on the cover of Madden. My Chicago Bears last season lost in the divisional round to the Los Angeles Rams 20-17. Heartbreaking game. Caleb Williams, the Iceman, Chi-Town Iceman. No disrespect to my man George Gervin, the original Iceman. But, I just think that the Bears, for us, the arrow's still pointing up. Now, it's not guaranteed that, because you had success last season, you're going to go into this season, try to win that division again. But I think that, from the Bears top to bottom, I just think that we're a well-positioned unit. I think the only thing that's a little bit uncertainty up in Chicago is the whole stadium situation. Whether or not, the Bears are going to stay in the great state of Illinois, move up to Arlington Heights, or get that, that little site, close to Lakeshore Drive all day. As being a, Chicago Bear fan in Chicago, and that's what I would prefer. We had the whole situation with the Hammond situation. I'm just going to keep it 100. Hammond is really, if you just look at it, and people that are not familiar, not from the area, Hammond is what you consider still in the metropolitan area of Chicago, just on the far, far south side. And so, people from Chicago, been to Hammond many times over. It's right on the other side of the border. But, this is Chicago Bears, man. And I think that, for me, I was feeling a certain kind of way from the moving to Arlington Heights and out of the city. But out of the state, I ain't going to be able to do. So there's a lot of polarizing things across the NFL, across the sport landscape that's jumping off. Baseball, we just got outside the All-Star game. Shout out to Jordan Walker winning the home run derby, man. And, I'm seeing that young man play, down here where I'm positioned at down in Georgia, man. So, congratulations to him. My White Sox and Cubs up in Chicago, man, looking in the playoffs as, the season starts today. Both teams will be in a position, the Sox in a position to win the division. Cubs, we're trying to creep on to come up on those Brewers, but we're in a good position in the wild card. So, can't forget about also, too, fresh off of Summer League. Can't be remiss if I ain't going to talk about Summer League real quickly. As we saw all the top picks participate in Summer League. AJ DeBanza, he played 2 games in the Summer League, looked impressive. We also had Darren Peterson, who was getting buckets in the Summer League. We had, Boozer making some good ways for the Memphis Grizzlies as they fell to the Golden State Warriors in the championship game of the Summer League. Then we got my man, Cam Wilson. And so, for me, it's a good situation, man. Or Caleb Williams, I'm sorry. Wilson. It's the city of the Calebs, man. Don't at me, man. It's just the season of the Calebs up in Chicago. But, I'm loving what I'm seeing from him as a young man that also had an opportunity to watch it in high school, him being from the greater Atlanta area. And so him going to the University of North Carolina and obviously being a McDonald's All-American, just well expected, good pick. My Bulls making good headway, new head coach. Also, 2 new general manager in Bryson Graham. I think that Diago Splitter, he did an outstanding job in Portland under the circumstances of last season with the whole Chauncey Billups situation. And so, man, I'm just kind of stoked just across the whole sport landscape, man. But definitely want to check in with you guys, man. I got season number 6, the pre-miss show coming up, man. We're going to jump that thing off mid to late August. So, man, definitely be checking out here, man. And once again, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot.